Hello everybody, my name is Ben Mundy and you're watching the MCW YouTube channel. Today I'll be talking about the financial juggernaut of the cinematic world, the MCU. This video will be a ranking of all the main villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, this video will be split up into two parts. Today we'll go through villains from number 24 to number 11, then in my next video will be the top 10. This video will include spoilers for the entirety of the MCU. In 24th is the main villain from Thor the Dark World, Malekith the Accursed. He's played by Christopher Eccleston but is voiced by Mark Thompson. For me, Thor the Dark World is the worst film in the MCU, and this villain is definitely a big contributor to that. Malekith sees the convergence at the start of the film and attempts to unleash the ether. After witnessing his army being defeated by Bor, he goes into hibernation and then looks for the ether when he wakes up, which leads him to Jane Foster in Asgard. After he has Frigga killed, half of his face is burnt by Thor's lightning, so he looks more like his comic counterpart. And then he absorbs the ether and fights Thor across all 9 realms, and finally he is crushed under his own ship at the end of the final fight. And he's bottom because the writing for him was poor and he's just so boring. He's so just not interesting. In 23rd is Yon-Rogg. He's the main villain of Captain Marvel and is portrayed by Jude Law. At the start of the film he was Versa's mentor and trainer. He tells her to use her brain, and then he's also the leader of Star Force and are hunting Skrulls. We found out that he's actually working for Ronan, who we know previously from the first Guardians of the Galaxy film. Captain Marvel learns that the Kree, who are Ronan's race, are actually the bad guys, and the Skrulls aren't that bad. She fights with Star Force, then fights Yon-Rogg, and he's easily defeated, and then she sends him back to Hala, which is their homeworld. Due to Carol Danvers being so overpowered in this film, he is this low because he wasn't a threat level, and the writing for him was poor. Captain Marvel, like, why do they have to make her so OP? Anyway, in 22nd is Ivan Vanko, aka Whiplash. He is played by Mickey Rourke, and at the start of the film he sees his father Anton Vanko die and then promises to get revenge on the Starks. Then we see a scene which is the perfect recreation of Tony building the arc reactor in the first Iron Man film, but this time it's Vanko building one, which leads to the creation of Whiplash Armor Mark 1. And then he goes to Monaco, where Tony is racing in the Monaco Grand Prix. He goes on the track and then attacks Tony, which leads to probably the best suit-up scene in the MCU. After being sent to prison, Ivan breaks out and then meets with Justin Hammer, and then they agree to work together. He starts to build an army of drones, and then Vanko says that he will continue working if he can get his ball. Then he continues to build the drones and then has a final fight at the Stark Expo. In the final battle, Rhodey and Stark blow up Vanko's suit, which ends up killing him, and he would be higher, but he's overshadowed by Justin Hammer and his fantastic dance moves. And it is a perfect example of Tony's dad being the reason for Tony's downfall in the earlier Iron Man films. In 21st is Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. I was debating whether or not to include him in this list, because technically you could say that Abomination's the main villain of Incredible Hulk, and he is on this list, he comes up later. But I felt like he could be the main villain, he orchestrates it all, so I've classed him as the main villain, or a main villain. If you disagree, I don't care. He's portrayed by William Hurt and is responsible for creating the Incredible Hulk and the Abomination. Throughout the Incredible Hulk, he hurts Bruce Banner and hires Emil Blonsky to go after him, and then later turns Blonsky into Abomination. He then shows up in Civil War and pitches the Sokovia Accords to the Avengers, which is literally, he doesn't do anything else apart from have a chat with Tony later on, which can skip over, don't really matter. He also appears in Infinity War as a hologram talking to Rhodey. He also appears, big spoiler in 3, at Tony Stark's funeral in Endgame, and he also has shown up in the Black Widow trailer, so he could have a big role in that. So he could be higher if he makes the Thunderbolts in Black Widow, which is very likely, been rumoured a lot. Then he might go up the list. Well, isn't that incentive for Marvel Studios? Bring the Thunderbolts. Apart from that, he didn't really do much, fairly inconsequential. So yeah, he's here. In 20th is the one that I've already mentioned, Emil Blonsky, aka Abomination. He's played by Tim Roth and could be called the main antagonist of the Incredible Hulk. He's brought in by Thunderbolt Ross to hunt Banner. Then he is injected with an altered super soldier serum and then fights Hulk but is nearly killed. Then later on he becomes Abomination after being injected with Bruce Banner's blood. They fight and destroy Harlem. Then Hulk bests Blonsky and he is imprisoned, so still alive out there in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and could come back, who knows. yeah, he's this low because he's only been in one film. If he appears more, then he could probably be higher. In 19th is the villain of Iron Man 3, Aldrich Killian. He is played by Guy Pearce and is the first example of an Iron Man villain that's actually Tony's fault. Tony leaves Killian on New Year's Eve after agreeing to meet with him to talk about his company AIM, and through Killian's work with AIM, he creates something called the Extremis virus. He reunites with Pepper and then explains it to her, then kidnaps her and kills Maya Hansen, a friend of Tony's. He tortures Rhodey and then breathes fire, because that came from nowhere. To stop him from escaping, he kidnaps the president of the USA and then has the final fight with the many Iron Man suits, like so many, and calls himself the Mandarin. We know this is incorrect because we're going to see the real Mandarin in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, so he's just a liar. But he's eventually killed by Pepper Potts, who he injected with Extremis. This low because he don't really do much. Quite forgettable as a villain, to be honest. In 18th is the main antagonist of Ant-Man and the Wasp, Ava Starr, aka Ghost. She is portrayed by Hannah John Carmen, and she is found with her deceased parents after they died in an explosion, and she developed an ability to phase through objects due to some quantum energy or something, because they like to put the word quantum in front of other words. She was adopted by Bill Foster, also known as Goliath, and blames Hank Pym for her parents' death. She has to sleep in a quantum chamber to ease her pain. She joins S.H.I.E.L.D. and is used to kill operatives. Her suit helps her harness her power, and then she fights Ant-Man and the Wasp and looks for their shrunken down lab. She gets the lab and then returns home and rests inside the quantum chamber. She kidnaps Scott, Hope and Hank and explains that she needs Janet Van Dyne to save her, but she's stuck in the quantum realm. She finds out where they've run away to after they escape the kidnapping with the lab. Then she is defeated by Hope and Scott. When Janet gets out of the quantum realm, she heals Ghost, and you can see her and Bill escape as S.H.I.E.L.D., go to where there's a random lab. As she escapes, she could easily return in a future film, but she's this low because she's quite forgettable. I actually forgot what her real name was instead of Ghost before recording this part, so yeah, she's that forgettable. In 17th is the other Ant-Man villain, Yellow Jacket, also known as Darren Cross. He's played by Corey Stoll and is the underling at Pym Tech, and reunites with Hank Pym when he presents the Yellow Jacket suit to certain people of the Ten Rings. He probably has the best kill of the MCU, and finally perfects how to use the Pym particles. He then confronts Hank Pym at his home, then traps Ant-Man to try and steal the suit. Then the two have a fight in a briefcase, and then on a kid's train set. And then Yellow Jacket shrinks so small and supposedly died. First of all, his suit is beautiful. It's genuinely one of the nicest in the MCU. Corey Stoll does a really good job, and he could technically still be alive in the quantum realm, so Ant-Man 3, we might get to see him again, and if so, that'll be good, because I liked him, I want to see more of him. In 16th is the first ever MCU villain from Iron Man 1, Obadiah Stane. Also known as the Ironmonger, and he was the partner of Howard Stark and then became a loyal friend of Tony. He welcomes Tony back after Afghanistan. At a party, Obadiah tells Tony that he is working for the Ten Rings, who are the group that kidnaps him, and then orders the building of the Ironmonger suit, and he paralyzes Tony and steals his arc reactor, so Tony nearly dies, but he doesn't. He battles Tony around Los Angeles, and Obadiah attempts to finally kill Tony, but is electrocuted when Pepper Potts overloads a prototype arc reactor, and he dies. Jeff Bridges does a very good job, and he has a very compelling connection to the main protagonist, and would be higher if he wasn't only in one film. The main problem is that he started the trope of villains being carbon copies of the heroes, but evil. In 15th is Ronan the Accuser. Lee Pace first appeared as the character as the main villain of the first Guardians of the Galaxy film. He is a Kree fanatic who was outraged by the peace treaty with the Xandarian people. He worked under Thanos, and he has a deal with him that if Ronan retrieved the orb, which holds the Power Stone, which is one of the Infinity Stones, for Thanos, then he would destroy Xandar for him. When confronted by Thanos and the other, he breaks the other's neck. When Ronan confronts Drax the Destroyer on the planet Nowhere, he subdues him and then attempts to drown him. But after Ronan gains the orb, he betrays Thanos and takes the power for himself, and attacks the Guardians of the Galaxy and then fights them on Xandar. Ronan was about to destroy Xandar when he was distracted. Then Drax shoots Ronan's hammer and the stone flies out, and then Star-Lord catches it, and all the Guardians hold hands like besties and destroy Ronan with the Power Stone. However, 5 years later, he appeared in the prequel film Captain Marvel, which was set before Guardians, so he was a tad younger. He witnesses his army get destroyed by Captain Marvel and then retreats back to Hala, which is their homeworld, and he would be higher if he had a bigger role in Captain Marvel and if he didn't die in Guardians. But you never know, it's the MCU, he might come back somehow. Now the next two I originally had the other way around, but when planning this video I realised how small of a role one of them had, so I switched them back around. So in 14th is Dormammu. Dormammu is obviously totally CGI because he looks like this, but he is voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch himself, who plays Doctor Strange, and he is confronted by Doctor Strange and then kills him repeatedly because he's stuck in a time loop until he couldn't stand the entrapment any longer and made a deal with him to leave. And he will most probably return in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, so he will probably end up higher on this list, but he didn't do much in the first film apart from orchestrate what Caecilius and the Zealots did. Speaking of Caecilius, in 13th is the villain from Doctor Strange who appeared the most. Shockingly enough, it's Caecilius. He's played by Mads Mikkelsen, who does a very good job as the character. He is Dormammu's servant and the leader of the Zealots. He steals the Book of Caglioso, which allows him to draw power from the Dark Dimension. He is attacked by the Ancient One at the start, where he finds out that she also draws power from the Dark Dimension. After escaping, he gains the power of Dormammu, which gives him fancy eye makeup. It's just beautiful, really, just as you can see. He then destroys the London Sanctum, which is where he has his first encounter with Doctor Strange. They battle and then he gets trapped by Doctor Strange and then tells him what his motives are, like every villain in every movie. Then there is a very cinematic fight between the Zealots and Doctor Strange, Ancient One and Mordo, where he ends up stabbing the Ancient One, which kills her in the end. He arrives later at the Hong Kong Sanctum for the final fight with Doctor Strange, Wong and Mordo. Then he's fused with the Dark Dimension, so technically he could return in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and he would be higher if he was more of a threat, but Doctor Strange defeats him with very little training in the second act of the film. In 12th is Ultron. Tony Stark wants to build a suit of armour around the world, but it ends up turning evil, and that's what becomes Ultron. When he is born, he researches the Avengers and seemingly destroys Jarvis. Then he builds himself his first ever body, which was some disused parts of Iron Legion. After attacking the Avengers, his first body is destroyed by Thor. In Sokovia, he meets with the Maximoff twins, which is where we see his prototype body. He murders Baron von Strucker, then attacks and confronts Ulysses Klaue as he is looking for vibranium for his new suit. Then Klaue makes the mistake of comparing Ultron to Tony Stark, which makes Ultron chop his arm off. And then Ultron attacks the Avengers, but his body is destroyed by Iron Man, so he tries to make a new one out of the vibranium, which ends up being Vision. And after the Avengers steal Vision's pod, Ultron kidnaps Black Widow, and then Ultron reveals his new suit to her by violently destroying the old one. After the Avengers find out where they are, the final third act ensues in Sokovia, where Ultron hopes to fly the country in the air and then drop it down. He steals a Quinjet and then fires a load of bullets down at Hawkeye and a kid, who were rescued by Quicksilver, but he ends up killing him. Then he is thrown out by Hulk and leave his mark, and if he returns it would be even better. In 11th, the character that just misses out on the top 10 is Red Skull. His first appearance is in Captain America the First Avenger, where he fights for the Nazis and then becomes the leader of Hydra and injects himself with an early version of the super soldier serum, which leaves his face horribly disfigured and turns him into Red Skull. He searches for the Tesseract and finds it in a church in Tonsberg, Norway. He harnesses the Tesseract's powers and uses it to make powerful Hydra weapons. He personally greets Captain America, where his mask is damaged during the fight, and he reveals his true face to Steve Rogers. In the final fight, he holds the Tesseract and is beamed up to space and is thought to be dead until Avengers Infinity War. In a shock return on Vormir as the keeper of the Soul Stone, he tells Thanos and Gamora that you have to throw something off the edge that means something to them, which ends up being Gamora. So Thanos obtains the Soul Stone, and then Red Skull returns again in Endgame, where Black Widow sacrifices herself for Hawkeye to obtain the Soul Stone. This means that he doesn't have to guard anything now, so he could return in a future film, and I hope he does because he's such a good character and I want to see more of him. That is it for the first part of the list. The next part will come out at some point. Knowing my consistency with videos might take a while, but that'll be the top 10 for this list. Thank you all for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe and share, and I'll see you on the next video.